We'll come to order. If you'd all rise. The Pledge of Allegiance. Mrs. Dever. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Tonight's agenda is going to deal with a public hearing, but that is not scheduled until 7:15, and we cannot hold the public hearing, until that time frame. We also are going to be having our sewer commissioners meeting with an ACO update and a discussion on external grease traps and alternatives. We have the fiscal 15 budget. At this time, what I will do is out of order, if everyone is in agreement. I do want to address an issue that has taken place over the last week with the permission of the board. Thank you. Last Tuesday, February 18th, the board met for the purpose of informal discussions regarding the FY15 budget with the town manager and the manager of budget and finance. This meeting was properly posted on February 13th, and due to the snowstorm and road conditions, I suggested to the videographer that perhaps to be safe, he should go home. I have received a phone call from Mr. DiNardo, town meeting member from Precinct 4, inquiring why the meeting wasn't televised. He stated he is in Florida for the winter, so I explained to him what the weather conditions were. He claimed he worked very hard to get these meetings televised and asked in the future if the meetings would be televised, and I informed him that they would. I have also received an email from Mr. Ravagno, president of Saugus Community Television, informing me not to dismiss a technician in the future. He goes on to state that he has received several complaints concerning our meeting, and that it was held under the open meeting law, and goes on to state about remote participation. And again, in the future, I would hope that you as a board would respect the rights of all concerned and not dismiss our videographer from his assignments. I find this behavior to be quite accusatory and offensive. No one was dismissed from any meeting, and quite frankly, this gesture was made for the safety of the individual. The sarcasm and insinuations that a select few in our community continue to make only fuel a fire that this board has worked very hard over the last several months to extinguish. I apologize to those in the community who are anticipating viewing our meeting, but I am sure that you would agree that the safety of a young man volunteering his time was the main priority. That being said, I will read to you what the meeting involved. The town manager read his transmittal letter outlining aid to the library that will increase operating hours and therefore allow the community to qualify for 100% state aid to the library. The town manager addressed 2 new positions at the DPW as recommended by the UMass Collins Center Organizational and Operational Report. Restoration of an engineering position, also recommended, underfunded at this time. A new position of deputy fire chief from a captain's position during a departmental restructuring in FY14 budget. Recommendations for parity adjustments recognizing the duties and responsibilities and duties of certain positions so as to retain and attract suitable individuals, as well as a 3% increase is reflected for all non-collective bargaining unit employees. The following budgets were reviewed. The town moderator's budget. There were no questions asked by board members. The Board of Selectmen. There was a new change, legal services to consultant services, and the town manager was not recommending. The town manager, under the general ledger number 0100000123 000005111, chief administrative aid. Salary adjustment recommendation of approximately 18%. Explanation given that this position had received a decrease in salary. Upon further discussion, the town manager explained that the funding was from an incorrect budget line revealed during the forensic audit, and that the position was fully funded. Therefore, there had not been an actual decrease in the funding of the position. Town manager alluded to seeking parity with other communities and referenced the administrative assistant to the superintendent of schools. Questions raised of principal clerk salary, currently at $45,000, when town meeting appropriated $40,800. Town manager stated he felt that that was what the individual deserved, and now recommending approximately a 4% increase. Finance committee, no questions asked by the board. Accounting, town accountant recommendation to increase funding to $85,000 from $77,000, which was in the FY14 revised budget. Explanation to attract suitable candidate. Accounting manager, 5% increase. HR and purchasing. Director of Human Resources, current salary, $77,250. FY14 budgeted for $75,000, now looking to increase position by approximately 7.5%. Assessors, deputy assessor, approximately 4% increase. Assistant deputy assessor, 6%. Questions were raised on expenses, and it was explained to the board that this is a reevaluation year. Treasurer's Department, Treasurer Collector, Budget and Cash Management Coordinator. Recommended salary adjustment approximately 11%. Last salary adjustment, FY13, approximately 15%. Questions were raised on overtime, and the town manager gave an explanation, given that this was never afforded to the employees before who had performed overtime services. Legal. There was a question raised on labor relations level funded when all contracts were settled. The town manager responded that this would deal with grievances, and he would like to see boards and commissions have access to counsel, and the chairman agreed. Town clerk, there really were not questions on that, but it did go into elections and registration. Election offices is an increase of 50%, an explanation given that more anticipated elections this year. Conservation Commission, no questions asked by board members. Planning Board, no questions asked by board members. Board of Appeals, no questions asked by board members. Request made of town manager and manager of budget and finance for budget to actuals. Informed they are working on it and should have it by the middle of next week, which is this week. Request made for organization chart as well as salary comparisons referenced by the administration. I appreciate your patience in having me read the information to the public, because this board feels very, very strongly about transparency, about letting the board have all of the information that we have, and to be put in a position of being accused of being anything less than respecting our community members, respecting each other, is offensive to this board. And I apologize to the folks again that were not able to see this, but I believe if it was my son, I would hope that somebody would send him home to be safe than to take a risk. All of the information is available. Our meetings are always open to the public, and nobody has violated the open meeting law. Thank you. Are there any questions from the board members? We still have 3 minutes before we have to have the public hearing. Would anybody want to raise anything? How do you?
Madam Chairman, do you want to do a citizens' comment period just in case somebody's here?
Thank you. Is there anybody here that wishes to address the board on the citizens' comment portion of the agenda? If not, we'll probably take a 3-minute recess, and then we'll come back for our public hearing. Could I have a motion for a recess?
So moved, Madam Chairman.
Seconded by the chair. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Meeting will come back to order. Time having arrived for a 7:15 public hearing on the application of Blast Fitness LLC, doing business as Workout World, located at 1201 Broadway, Square One Mall, for permit to extend hours of operation in accordance with Section 810 of the Town of Saugus bylaws by allowing business to be open for operation at 5 a.m. An application for entertainment license for televisions. Is the applicant here? What is the wish of the board? The applicant's not here.
Thanks.
Is there a motion to continue?
I'll make a motion to continue the hearing, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mrs. Panetta moves to continue the hearing to the March 11th meeting, I think it would be, correct, Mrs. Reed? Seconded by the chair. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much. Okay. Tonight we'll also be dealing, as I stated, with the sewer commissioners meeting, and the first will be an ACO update. Hi, how are you? If you want to come to the podium. If you could just give your name for the listening audience.
Good evening, George Heiler. I'm the environmental counsel that's been working on this project with CDM since 2005, and I'm giving you a status update. With me tonight is Christina Edberg of my law firm, who's been worked with us dealing with the negotiations and the implementation, and now the winding down, so to speak, of this sewer system rehabilitation program. Also is Jonathan Kone of CDM, who's here to speak on the specific actions that have been taken by the consultant for the town on dealing with this implementation of these sewer upgrades. And I might add that this is one of these projects that has actually been referenced by DEP on numerous occasions with other towns in the states. And now, from what I hear, talking to Jonathan, beyond state level to demonstrate how well a system and the schedule that has worked under budget, in compliance and no overflows. And so it's actually a very nice presentation that the board asked me to make tonight. Again, this goes back to the original agreement was 2005 with the Department of Environmental Protection. There was numerous milestones which included upgrades of the system, pump houses. Again, just to make sure that these sewer systems were running in compliance with the Clean Water Act and the State Clean Water Act. All that's been moving along on schedule. There's 7 subsystems that have been rehabilitated. There's also a more comprehensive inflow identification program that CDM will talk about later on when I'm done. Those 7 systems are complete. I think there's 2 more systems for rehabilitation over the next few years. The deadline, August of this year, is more than regarding the system that's already been completed, and I think they'll talk a little bit more on that. There's really not much else. I can actually answer questions which would be more efficient, the board, on any questions, but all that's left is really a semi-annual report. But now that the sewer bank has been discontinued over the last few years, which I might add was a case that was precedent-setting that allows other towns, that sewer bank case that went up to the SJC that was won by the town of Saugus, basically allowed that type of fee origination for sewer upgrades. So that has been discontinued. So the semi-annual report seems to be a very more simplified, and I think Stacy DePasquale is the individual that's been doing that on an annual basis and doing it, and DEP has been more than happy with the comprehensive nature of that submittal. Other than that, there's the inflow protection. There's regarding the sump pumps, there's been some dunning letters that have gone out. That usually happens when, at the end of it, CDM gives us a list of individual property owners that need to either discontinue or get a certification. Those went out, and we're dealing with those appropriately. Again, I'm open to any questions by the the board on any questions regarding these deadlines, which are way ahead of schedule, under budget. And again, I don't want to steal CDM's thunder on this one.
Any questions of the board members at this time?
Madam Chairman?
Selectman Castanetti?
Just one question, Judge. If we're way ahead of schedule, when do we anticipate the project will be 100% complete?
I believe, again, I think it's 2016. You'll have reporting requirements, but I think the last real major effort by the town would be that private inflow identification and removal program. That should be done. It's done townwide. Now will be done by the end of December 31st, 2016.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Selectman Panetta?
In section number 6, it says 2013 ongoing. When do you think that is going to be completed?
Let me see, section 6.
In the map that was in our presentation? Are you going to answer
that's
that
in
question?
That's actually in CDM's presentation.
CDM's,
so,
and I assume CDM is also going to answer the question on how much below budget we are? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, George, for the introduction. I've not been able to stand in front of the board before, so I'm very excited, I will say. I'm filling in for Paul Ross today. He had his hip replaced, so. My name's Jonathan Kuhne. I've been working on this project since the inception back in 2005. I worked on the facilities plan and been the design engineer and project manager of this program from the beginning. Here today to talk about an update of where we are, and George pretty much gave us a general update about where we are, and we are under budget and on schedule. I will go right into if you open up this package that I have developed, the map shows where we're currently doing work in subsystem 6. The construction is ongoing. It should be completed by, well, when the weather warms up, essentially. The manholes can't be finished. The lining can't be installed when the temperatures are below 45 degrees. So usually this happens every year. We get into about the springtime, we finish up the manholes, and then we're all set. So you're looking about an April, maybe May timeframe to finish the construction there. In the meantime, we're also working in section 5, which is in green. It's 2014. We're doing the inspections right now, CCTV inspections, to gather information so that we can conduct the design. And the design is essentially ongoing now. We already have manhole inspections that we've conducted, so I'm currently reviewing videos and starting the design and specifications for the bidding documents that will come out in June or July of this year. In terms of the budget, the next page gives a summary of how much has been spent thus far, and it doesn't tell you how much lower we are, it just shows you what we've actually spent. However, the next page is a graph that dramatically, I think, shows what we had predicted in gray for planning level costs and what we've actually spent in yellow. Generally speaking, we're under in almost every year except for that first year, that pilot area, and that was because of the uncertainty from the contractors as to what we were doing. It was back then in 2007, we were piloting a comprehensive rehabilitation program, which, as George mentioned before, has sort of turned into a model for the entire Commonwealth, and I've had the I guess, pleasure of traveling the entire country to give presentations about how this program works and why it's such a good way to tackle ACO-driven projects for private inflow removal and for infiltration and inflow removal as well. So back then, as I said, it was people were a little bit apprehensive about what it meant to do rehab in every single pipe and every manhole and every service lateral within a particular subsystem, and now the prices have dropped dramatically because of economy of scale and because technology has gotten better and better. So we're seeing a combination of things that's leading to better prices for you guys. The page after that is just another graph that's just showing how we're going below actual costs from what was predicted and what we're actually spending. So at this point in time, in the year 2013, we should have spent close to $25 million, and instead we spent about $16 million. So significant savings. The page after that is just a little sort of a goofy graphic, but it's fun to see it in terms of how much flow is being removed. We've removed 55%. We've removed 6 million gallons to date, which is 55% of what we intend to remove. Now, what's interesting to note is you're saying, well, you're probably thinking to yourself, well, if we've done removal in 7 of the 9 subsystems, why are we only 55% of the way there? And the reason is twofold. Number one, we haven't yet done the regression analysis, which tells us how much flow we removed. We haven't done that for the last 2 subsystems. So technically speaking, we're only seeing 5 of the 9 being reported in this tank with water in it. And the other part of it is, as George mentioned, when this rehab is finished in the year, I guess, this is 2014, so 15, 16. In the year 2016, we will then do private inflow removal town-wide, which will further close the gap and get us to the 11 million gallons that we're hoping to achieve. So, lastly, the private inflow removal program status, and this is the part that is sometimes most contentious because it involves dealing with people in the town and sending out letters and things. But we've had a really good compliance rate, and again, another model that I've gone around the country promoting, and that's the fact that the board had the audacity, and I think in a good way, to give this program what I call teeth. Right? They essentially said, we're going to develop a bylaw that says if you don't remove a sump pump or redirect a private inflow source, you're going to be fined $50 a day. And a lot of communities don't go that far, and the reality is people don't listen to you when you send out a letter if there isn't anything to encourage them to follow through. So what we've seen is an 87% compliance rate to date, and this number is actually slightly skewed because we're still in the middle of the private inflow removal program that we're doing now. So there's 2 subsystems, subsystem 6B and 6. And we have sent out, I believe, 40 letters, right? 40 letters went out to people that didn't comply within the first 3 months when we had hoped that they would comply. And we typically see a huge increase in people calling because they get a letter from the law firm that says, you now owe $20,000, and people freak out. So it really works. And like I said, I've promoted it, and I think it has to do with the fact that the town stepped forward and said, we're going to make a bylaw that requires people to do this. So you're seeing really good removal rate percentages, and it really helps in achieving the goals that we're trying to achieve. Without a private inflow removal program as aggressive as this, it's next to impossible to remove the kinds of flows that the DEP and EPA was requiring you to remove. So that's pretty much my little summary here. I would be glad to answer any questions that anybody has.
Madam Chair?
Selectman Panetta?
The graph that you were discussing that shows that we've spent thus far $16.1 million compared to a budget at this particular time by about $24.5 million, if I'm looking at this correctly. What do you anticipate by year 2016, now knowing what you know from the other 7 systems that you've put together, what that final number is going to be? I assume it's going to be around 21 million, 22 million?
Well,
Are there any large expenses that are going to be needed at the end of the project?
no.
That are going to bring it back up? Because it looked like the original project, if we look at this graph, was around 33 million.
Right.
Because we were saying 27 million, but really, the original budget was around 33 million.
Right. When you factor in police details and the GSRE, which is the resident engineering and things in the field, that bumped that price up from 27 to 33. In terms of where we think we're going to be, what I can tell you is I've started to review some of the CCTV videos for Subsystem 5, which is the one we're doing for the design in 2014. And if you look at this graph here, which shows what should have been spent or what we thought would have been spent, and then the yellow is what actually had been. Subsystem 6B is a good example. 6B and 5B both, but 6B way more dramatically. It turns out that Subsystem 6B, very much similar to Subsystem 5 in that it's mostly PVC pipe. And we don't like to put cured-in-place pipe liners in PVC pipe for a multitude of reasons. So instead, we tackle the rehab in a little different ways with spot repairs, short liners, manhole rehab, and service lateral connection lining. That typically ends up being cheaper than going manhole to manhole lining. And so we will probably see a much smaller cost for Subsystem 5 than what is predicted. What's predicted was what, 3.2 $3.7 million. It will be significantly less than that. So I can say that will be a lot cheaper this year coming around. Subsystem 4 is a subsystem that is I believe in the older part of the city. It is. So that's going to be all AC pipe or VC pipe, which will mean we'll be lining all of those pipes. So the prices will be somewhere in the range of what we thought, but will be less than what we predicted as it was in all the other years previously. So I wish I could tell you exactly what I think it would have been, and I could come back to you with that, but.
No, I'm sorry, Madam Chair. Just as an estimate, so if we were to say 16.1 so far, and then you think it's going to be less than the 3.5, actually about 3.7 million, maybe that would be 3 million, 2.5 million? You really have no idea? I'm just trying to come up with an estimate. 3, so we're at 19.1.
Yeah, probably, $3.5 million more, $4 million more.
For 5 or for the rest?
Total, for the rest.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, probably somewhere around for 5, maybe a little less than $1 million, and then for 4, probably 2.5 or so. I mean, don't hold me to that, but
Yeah. So probably around 20.5 million, $21 million.
Sure.
At the end.
Right.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mrs. Panetta. Does anybody else have any questions? We appreciate your time and coming in and sharing this with us. Thank
No
you
problem.
so much.
My pleasure.
Mr. Manager, excuse me, did you have any questions of this gentleman?
I don't, just maybe if he would sign on a napkin of what the cost estimate was, that would be great.
On my way out.
Can I ask one more question?
Of course.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You talked about how efficient this was, and, of course, we're below budget, and how much faster things got done than what you were anticipating. You're ahead of schedule. What do you attribute for being ahead of schedule? I mean, just everything went right for you? What were the main elements that made this a success?
Well, I wouldn't say we're ahead of schedule. I
think that,
Yeah, I did, when I say ahead of, their schedule is different than what the administrative consent order.
okay.
So there, again, when you have certain deadlines with administrative consent order, we're completing those before the required date.
Okay, so in other words, you said we were ahead of schedule, but we're ahead of the ACO schedule. But CDM, you're right on schedule.
We're on schedule in terms of.
Because you wanted to be ahead of the predetermined schedule.
Yeah, let me backtrack for 1 second. He makes a good point. In 2014, we were supposed to rehab subsystem 5, and that's where we are. So in that case, we're on schedule. However, by 2014, we probably would have removed, we anticipated, less gallons than what we have removed. In that case, when we report to the DEP and the EPA, we can say we are ahead of schedule in terms of what we're trying to remove, and we will get there and be above what we said we were going to remove in the end. So in that case, we would be ahead of schedule if you want to look at it like that. And what do we attribute that to? We attribute that to this comprehensive rehabilitation program that, as I was mentioning before, has proven to be something that it's sort of been a watershed moment. I mean, to be perfectly honest with you. DEP asked me to present at the NUIA conference in January, and I gave a 30-minute presentation about how this program works and why it works. And I'm going to be in Baltimore in 2 weeks to give a talk at a workshop prior to a conference there for the Water Environment Federation collection systems about the successes. I'm teaming with someone from Oakland, California, and someone from New Orleans, Louisiana, to talk about 3 programs that are sort of similar, and that we've sort of developed this comprehensive plan, and they're similar, but they're not exactly the same, but they're all consent order, and so they brought the 3 of us together to sort of educate people in the industry how to tackle problems when they're faced with consent orders and things. So,
but there's another entity that's important, was DEP, willing to work within this structure of a consent order that allowed enough time, allowed enough discretion for the engineer to work within specific guidelines and figure out what the cost-benefit analysis is when we're addressing certain sections of the town. So again, it was a DEP has to was very much a part of working.
Excuse me if I could interrupt you for just one moment. You don't have a mic at your table, and the folks at home will not be able to understand what you're saying. Do you mind when you do speak, if you could go to the mic? I know it may be a case of coming up and down, but it's so the citizens can hear you as well. Thank you.
Madam Chairman? Just through you, maybe one of the things that would be helpful too, I think, just to remind people is sort of the ACO itself is in order that, and how the history is, in my understanding is that we had to pick a certain amount of sectors to deal with a certain amount to be removed, but there's also sectors that haven't been dealt with, and that's something that we may want to think about or consider moving forward after this project is completed, similar to what we're trying to set up with the water replacement main, to have a capital improvement infrastructure. Beyond being ordered to do something, we were forced to be into this, but maybe you can sort of give a background of that, I think might be helpful.
Sure. When we first got into this, we had to first start with developing a facilities plan, and that was to determine how much flow we needed to remove in order to come into compliance. It was a two-pronged thing. It was, where is the knee of the curve to tell you how much flow you should remove, as in, what is the level of control the town should seek? So we ran model simulations to determine how much flow would have to be removed, and then, I wish I had the graph in the presentation that I've given a million times, it'd be so fun. It shows essentially that if you removed 11 million, if you remove 40% of the flow in the system, you could have 0 overflows in a 10-year storm. You would need to remove 60% or more to have 0 overflows in a 20-year storm. So we pitched to the DEP at that point and said, listen guys, 60+% removal is next to impossible. We know this from history, engineering reports, and everything else. But 40%, while it's ambitious, is something we think we can get. So we pitched that 10-year level of control, and they said go for it. So that's where the level of control came from. Then, using the hydraulic model, determined how much flow you'd have to remove, and then backed into looking at every subsystem within there's 27 subsystems in the town. We determined which of the top, we found the top 12 most, that contributed the most flow, and then of those 12, we rehabbed one after the next until we got to the amount of flow we needed to remove, and that ended up being 9 subsystems in the end. You make a good point that you're right, now there's 27 minus 9, so there's 18 more subsystems now that we've not done any rehabilitation in. We'll do private inflow removal, but we have not done rehabilitation. It may be prudent, especially in parts of the city or parts of the town that are not PVC. Transite pipe and older asbestos cement pipe. It might be a good idea to go after some of those areas just to have a tighter sewer system and a better conveyance system for your citizens.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions from the board members? Thank you again so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have what we have. Oh, I'm sorry, Christine. Okay, thank you.
Good evening. I'm Christina Engberg, Environmental Counsel for Saugus, along with George Heiler, and we're here to discuss grease interceptors, which are commonly known as grease traps. The grease traps are required in town for a variety of reasons, and the most clear statement of that is in the town's sewer use regulations, which specifically state that grease traps are required for all restaurants and food service establishments. These must be installed under your sewer use regulations, and additionally, your sewer use regulations prohibit the discharge of grease that solidifies or becomes viscous between 32 degrees and 150 degrees, which covers most types of fat, grease, and oil. So most discharges coming from restaurants or other food establishments would be required to go through a grease interceptor or a grease trap. But additionally, in addition to your local regulations, Saugus discharges to Lynn under the Agreement for the Treatment and Disposal of Wastewater. And that agreement also has requirements concerning grease and oil. There is a NIPDES permit that's associated with the agreement, And the NIFTY's permit prohibits discharges containing 15 milligrams per liter, which is a very small amount, of oil and grease in the wastewater. And the way to achieve this very limited discharge is through a grease interceptor, or a grease trap. Additionally, these grease traps also go hand in hand with the ACO that we've just been discussing, because grease, if it gets into your system, will back up the sewer pipes and will lead to overflows of the system, or could lead to overflows of the system. So you need to have grease traps or grease interceptors to continue to comply with the ACO to ensure that there will not be overflows of the system. So for all of these reasons, some sort of grease trap or grease interceptors have to be installed in restaurants or other food establishments. Any questions?
Selectman Dever?
It's nice to see you again, Christine.
Good to see you.
It's been a while. When we talk about grease trap interceptors or grease traps, I know that you are speaking about restaurants, but how do we educate the entire community, because they too, we all discharge into the system?
That's right.
Education seems to be a very big piece of it.
I
And
think
what
it
would you
be.
suggest on that?
I think that to educate the community, we'd have to do some sort of public outreach, that we'd have to come up with some sort of plan to educate the public about the dangers of discharging grease and oil and fat into the system, because it really destroys the pipes. It clogs the pipes and causes backups. But it is important to remember that right now, only restaurants and food establishments have to have an actual physical grease interceptor.
Thank you. And Madam Chairman, just one other question. Our clerk has done a tremendous amount of research for us. And I noticed one of the pieces of information was from the city of Boston, and they regulate by the number of seats. It seems like every community is struggling to come up with the best way to approach this and yet not hurt economic development in their own communities. So are you seeing this in other communities where they're struggling to reach a balance on this?
We are. There's different ways to approach it, and it depends how strict the town or the community wants to be. So one way to approach this issue is by the number of seats in the establishment. Right now, Saugus does not require grease traps where in retail food stores. So retail food stores, like supermarkets, also sell prepared food that would be excluded from the grease trap regulations. But as it is now, it's a very broad regulation right now in Saugus.
Unfortunately, our regulations are many decades old, and we have work to do. But I really appreciate you offering the information, and I think education is a big key to it.
I agree.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman.
Selectman Allen?
In reference to the discharge that you were saying on the measurements of 15 mils, was it 15 mils
It is 15 milligrams per liter.
per liter? Do we have a number where we stand as of right now?
I don't have that. I don't know if CDM has that information. We can determine that for you.
One of the main reasons why we've asked just about all of you to come here this evening is because we are struggling somewhat with trying to determine the best approaches, if you will, not to overburden our businesses coming into the community, and yet we still have the regulations to follow. So we've heard so many different viewpoints on the grease traps and on the grease trap alternatives, if you will. Do you have familiarity with those?
I don't have great familiarity with those, other than I know some of them that are out there, but we would recommend that CDM could do an evaluation of various models of alternatives to a traditional grease trap.
CDM could do the analysis for us
Yes, yep, yes.
on something that wouldn't be a large scale that you're used to dealing with. My understanding is that when you're talking about things of this nature, it's usually on a very large industrial scale, but you can come down to a smaller scale, and you can also provide information on that. I know we also have some tremendous resources here in our community. Our employees have a tremendous amount of knowledge and expertise on this as well.
Hey, Madam Chairman, just a comment. That's great if they're able to do that. I know that Selectman Castanetti and myself had a conversation with Paul Ross that explained that they did a larger type thing, and they wouldn't be able to look at the smaller units or analyze those. So, but if it's something that they think they can do, that would be, I think, helpful, because I even asked Paul Ross for a recommendation on somebody that could do that, and he was unable to come up with any recommendation.
That's so important to have these conversations then in these meetings that we're having at this time. I would ask, I know when we brought in our superintendent of Public Works, you and I had a conversation that his background, when we originally talked about this, you, I believe, have a tremendous background in dealing with this, do you not? Thank you. Do you mind, Christina, if I just recognize him for a moment? Thank you so much. You could just give your name for the public, okay, Brendan?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Brendan O'Regan, I'm the new DPW Director for the town of Saugus. Yes, we had a similar problem in the city of Newburyport, where I started off as sewer superintendent and ended up as Director of Public Works after a 15-year tenure with the city. Yeah, significant problem, and we were able to address it through revisions to our bylaws and things, and inspections, constant inspections and things along those lines. It's not an easy solution. It takes a lot of work and a lot of effort and some expense.
Why don't you elaborate a little further for me? That was a very broad statement. A lot of work. You included other departments in this. I'm assuming your Department of Public Health?
Yes, we worked with our Board of Health and Building Department.
Yeah.
And the Sewer Department. And between the three departments, we developed a technologically based limit for specifically for fats, oil, and grease. Mm-hmm. And it was about a 3-year effort to get to the point where we were comfortable that the limit that was established and the work that was done to show that the systems that were in place were designed properly and installed properly, till we could get to the point where we felt we were in compliance with that technologically based limit. So it was an effort. It wasn't something that was done overnight.
Mm-hmm.
Madam Chairman?
Selectman Dever?
I think you're being very humble. I'm so thankful you have come forward. You've been with us since November, and we've searched wide and low to get someone to assist us and to guide us. And in looking at your background, 10 years up in Newburyport, and I understand you actually conducted fog workshops.
That's correct.
So you're familiar with a fog ordinance or
Yes.
bylaw that we would
Yes.
need.
Yes.
You're familiar with the need, you're familiar with the education component
Yes.
in working with other boards and commissions, and I'm just so glad you have come forward, and we're very thankful to have you, and we could have saved months here had we had your expertise. So for me, it just seems like we want to find this balance. No one wants to grant waivers and undo all the work that's been done and all the taxpayer money that's been spent. You were here all the time to help us.
Well, the last
And
few
so,
months.
part of it is education, part of it is enforcement, part of it is updating our sewer bylaws, and I'm just really thankful to you, so thank you.
Well,
Haven't done anything yet, but we intend to hope that you do.
The town manager said from, day one, we're here to help people, and that's, we have a certain job description, but if we come with an expertise that's outside that job description, that's what we're here to do, is to find solutions to problems, so anything we can do to help, so.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Selectman Panetta.
Thank you. You talked about a technology-based limit.
Yes.
And I'd like to understand how you determined that, you said it was over a course of 3 years. I'd like to understand how you determined that technology-based limit. Just give us a little, it doesn't have to be very specific and detailed, but just grandiose,
Right.
so that we could understand. And secondly, when you put in these, whether they be new systems or whatever the device was that you put in, whether it be an external grease trap or an internal acting like an external grease trap, who monitored these systems and how often were they monitored?
Well, we treated the fog limit, or fats, oil, and grease limit, like you would treat a local limit in an industrial pretreatment program. And that is, the treatment plant that you discharge to can accept so much of a certain pollutant. And there's certain criteria that determine what a certain treatment plant can handle. There's actually, the EPA has a document called the Industrial Pretreatment Program, which you can review, and it shows you for certain types of treatment processes, you can get certain amount of removals from that treatment process. But to take a step back, what Christine had mentioned was the issue of the 15 milligrams per liter. That's the receiving water standard that the Lynn Water and Sewer discharges to. What I mean when I say that is the Lynn Wastewater Treatment Facility can discharge no more than 15 milligrams per liter of fog to the body that it discharges to. So knowing that, and knowing the removal efficiencies of the plant itself for fats, oil, and grease, you can determine what the plant can handle. Once you determine what the plant can handle, then you determine the components of the wastewater that come to the plant. Residential component being one. Selectwoman had mentioned before about other causes of fog, not just restaurants. Industrial component, and then the commercial component, of which the biggest one would be biggest commercial component of fog would be the restaurants. You allocate a portion of that load to the different characteristics. You need to determine from water consumption records how much each of these establishments are discharging, so you can then apportion that load accordingly. Once you, I could speak probably for several hours on this, but this specifically, that is several hours, if not days, worth of work to do this. And once you are at the point where you know this information, you can determine, based on that, what concentration or milligram per liter, as Christina said, that you can allocate to the industries. And then you have a technologically based limit that's defensible.
Well, thank you. And in terms of the monitoring,
I'm sorry, that's right, you had asked
that
about that.
was the second part to the question.
I apologize.
Who monitored those and how often were they monitored?
The city had city representatives do the monitoring, and it was determined that it would be twice a year that they would be monitored. But that's not something that's set in stone. I'm sure there would be other establishments that might have to be sampled more frequently than that, others less frequently. There's really no, this is the way it exactly has to be. It's what works best for your community.
And when you say city representatives, who did you mean?
City employees.
Just
Employees of the
Board of
sewer,
Health?
employee of the sewer department specifically. The reason why that worked good for Newburyport is they already had an industrial pretreatment coordinator who was going around to the industries to sample already.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just a matter of adding that. We don't have that in Saugus. We don't have a plant, so we don't have an industrial pretreatment coordinator that's already sampling the industry. So it would be an additional, this is what I mean when I said earlier how it would be additional services, additional costs. That would be one of the additional costs.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman?
Selectman Dever.
In many communities that I've had a chance to look at, the board has had a chance to look at, they actually have a fog manager. And my question would be, where you've worked and created and lectured on fog ordinances. Do you feel it would be difficult to create an ordinance for our community? And
It could be done. It wouldn't be something that would be days or weeks. It would be months to years to accomplish. So-
months to years to create
Well,
an ordinance?
Well, to get it to literally just write it, it would be, to get everything passed and in place and the calculations done, it wouldn't be something that, it would be, yes, it would be something several months to accomplish.
Several months, okay.
Yeah.
And if I could just
So,
interject on that point, that's something that, once we draft the regulation, you all take a look at it and offer your comments, and if it goes into a bylaw, that goes through a whole process, getting a town meeting vote. So it can be a time-consuming process, depending on which approach you take.
Would you see it as a valuable tool for our Board of Health as well as our community after spending $16 million?
Yes, I would.
Thank you. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Selectman Allen?
Question for you. Up in Newburyport, were you utilizing both internal grease traps and interceptors along with external?
we left it up to the individual establishment on how they would meet the limit. So the answer to your question is yes. But we didn't just assume that they would meet it. We had a rigorous sampling program to assure that they were.
Obviously, the purpose of tonight's meeting is because, and we have a few folks in the back of the room who have patiently been joining us over the course of several meetings because they are waiting for a determination on an
You know, this subject matter is dear to my heart because one of my first jobs before I was a lawyer at DEP was inspecting wastewater treatment plants. And I'm a scientist by trade. And one of the issues that was being discussed was there's the language of a bylaw, there's the regulation, but the limit is what we're talking about. And what was very elegantly detailed by your new commissioner is that you have to do a calculation, and CDM could be of great support to figure out flow, velocity, turbidity. There's all these variables that come into play on what limits you'd have in certain areas and how much flow or how much oil and grease. Now, I represent some national chains that of restaurants that actually have their own programs implemented when they put in their restaurants. So you have that's something you can feed off of. But I do think it would be beneficial to do an additional study or have a group sit down and see if they can come back with a alternative analysis on what best would serve this community. And I think that's how you want to do it. But you're really working your way back from the treatment plant, the limits in Lynn, back to your pump stations, and seeing how it basically comes into the system and where your hot spots are, and then calculate from there. So it really is you're right, it is a difficult, but it can be calculated. And I defer to the engineers on that.
One of our concerns is that, again, we have had some folks that have been very patiently waiting for determination from the board. Certainly, we want to be in compliance with the ACO. We also have our sewer regulations. One of the questions that has been raised at several of the meetings, these are small establishments that are trying to, for lack of a better term, they're trying to achieve the American dream, and their first step to achieve that is to blast to the tune of $50,000 and to put in an external grease trap. It's too cumbersome. It's too cumbersome. It's forcing them away from trying to achieve that goal. Have you had any experience with an alternative to that? These were a lot of the questions that were raised. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Kestner. I know you were pretty strong on this. Looking through the sewer regulations, it says that we need an external type. But when our enforcement folks have to do their job, then it needs to be in the ground. Now, like I say, we have a few folks here this evening that have been waiting for a determination from the board. We're in a little bit of a bind. We don't want to be able to just arbitrarily waive something that could create problems for the investment that the taxpayers have made into this system, and yet we also don't want to err on the side of forcing somebody to do something that perhaps afterwards said, well, you really didn't need to do that. So do you have any familiarity of that in-between solution?
It's a difficult question to answer because, again, what was discussed when I used to do my inspections many years ago, each facility is unique. How much flow, how much gallonage is coming out of that facility, what system is there existing at the time. Some of them grandfathered, but you're really balancing it. And I really think, my opinion based on what the discussions have been just tonight, is I really believe that some calculations have to be performed within some of your main pipe flow, your flow is some of your main pipe systems to determine how much capacity and what's going into that Lynn treatment facility. Because if I remember correctly, there are limits. You have a couple of people you have to get approvals from when you're dealing with one of these, when you're dealing with a off-site treatment facility in another town. And again, I think my first move would be to bounce it off. You have a very capable individual just started, would be to do some investigation on what are the other communities doing, particularly in the Lynn area, as well as what are some of the other communities doing in Massachusetts. And I believe there's people probably at the Department of Water Pollution Control, at DEP, that would be more than helpful to at least give some guidance to the town. That's my suggestion at this time, because I really don't have the specifics in front of me, but it's a fog or fat oil and grease is it's a problem that's been, it impacts wastewater treatment plants. Because I used to test for those when I used to inspect the influent and effluent. And this is back in the early 80s. So it's something that has to be dealt with, but I do think the department the pre-treatment suggestion I think is an excellent, analysis is an excellent suggestion, and I think that is your first step to see if we can get some more information and see if we can supply that. And the alternatives analysis through CDM, I mean, this is a very well-respected company that it's been dealing with water pollution and treatment facilities all over the country. I do think it's something to look at and see and get some feedback from people who are on the ground doing this.
Well, I think a couple of months ago, and as we had the conversation, we were led to believe that your company, it was at a much, much larger scale than what we're dealing with here, so it was kind of beyond the scope. But you're saying that's not the case, that something of this size you could. Okay, then we'll just start the conversation again. How's that? That's the best way to put it. We'll just start it all over again. You folks are the experts. I know we have the Director of Public Health here, Mr. Giacalone. Pardon me? Mr. Kennedy, the plumbing inspector. Thank you so much for coming out this evening. And I see we have a couple of other folks in the back that perhaps at an earlier time had some products.
Madam Chairman? Sorry, go ahead.
Mr. Giacalone, if you could come to the podium, please.
Good evening, everyone.
You've just heard all the conversation. I, for one member of the board, am very, very green on all of this. I've tried to read all of the materials, the sewer regulations, the materials that were provided to us by Wendy, our clerk. I have some materials here that were presented by Selectman Castanetti. And to be frank with you, it's very hard to wrap your hands around this. Going through the sewer regulations, again, it does say external type. What do you folks feel here tonight? And I don't know if you can give me an answer on this. How do we best serve these folks who are trying to come into our community to provide a business that would be vital to our community? What would you feel, is this external, what Mr. Castanetti was talking about before, after reading all of it? If the external grease trap is located in a basement and they have their manifest sheets that they have to be provided to, correct? They all have to, once they go through this processes. Just like, for instance, when I had to get rid of sharps or blood products in the laboratory, there was a process of where they went. Do you feel that that can be something that can be accomplished using an external in a basement?
I agree with what DPW director had said, that it needs to be taken a step further with the proper calculations. But I think the point is that we have to look at these establishments individually, because you don't just want to make a blanket saying that, okay, you have to put an outside grease trap, but in issuing waivers where you're not going to have any type of protection in case that one tank fails, you need a secondary type. Now, whether it be located outside, or a secondary tank that might be going in the basement, which is one of the new technologies, but we're not here to promote, one particular brand, obviously. But just the technology itself, or the process that should have a secondary type of tank there. And if it can't go outside, or cost is an issue, or location itself, I think the fact of the matter is that you have some type of secondary containment there. That's important, just in case you have the internal one that fails. So I guess that's my answer, that if a second one can be put in, and you're saying in the basement, as opposed to outside, as long as it's sized appropriately as well to see what their flow is, because you have to take into consideration the menus. Whether it's strictly takeout, you're going to have less flow, or if you have eat-in, you're going to have more grease generated. So the menu is important too to look at. So each establishment should be looked at individually.
Madam Chairman.
Selectman Castanetti.
I'm glad Mr. O'Regan came this evening, thank you, because I think there's a wealth of knowledge there that we should be tapping into. I'm sure you don't have enough to do, right? We can use you for this too. But one of the things I liked about what he said was they left it up to the establishment to determine what type of system they want to install, as long as it does the job that's prescribed by the authorities that oversee this. I think that you mentioned how old these, Maureen, I think you might have mentioned how old these bylaws were. Mm-hmm. It's time to step up to the 21st century. I think the technology has evolved to the point now where there's a lot of alternatives to an external type grease trap that'll do just the same, if not better job than putting these old grease traps in. And Town of Saugus sewer use regulations, you folks have mentioned this twice, 3 times already tonight. Section 21 states an outdoor type of grease trap. And I asked you, Frank, the last time you were here, if it made any difference if it was in the ground or in the basement. And I think the answer was no, it probably didn't make any difference.
Well, I think as I, from what I recall, he said the intent of it was an external tank when it was written in 85, but now, again, there is other technologies there, so can a tank in a basement be just as efficient as the one outside? Again, depends on what it is, how much you can hold, and the capacity. So the answer would be yes.
I think one other thing I want to add too, Madam Chairman, that there's been some folks talking on the outside about our meetings here, and that our intent was to grant waivers to the grease trap requirement. And I'm here to tell everybody that's watching and listening tonight that is absolutely not the case. We're looking to provide a solution to an issue that doesn't cripple small business owners in our town and protects the administrative consent order under which we're operating right now. So what we're looking for is the best alternatives at the least cost for our business people so that they can comply with the ACO that we're faced with today. And that's the reason for all these discussions. Right now, we have restaurants that are operating that probably should have better grease interceptors or grease trap systems, and yet because of the deliberations we're going through here on a regular basis, it keeps getting postponed and postponed and postponed, which does not serve the community or the business. And I think it's time that we did as much as we can as quickly as possible to come up with a resolution, and I do like the fact that you left it up to the business owners to determine their own system. I don't think we need to force feed things down people's throats that really aren't required. So I just want to make that very, very clear that we are not here trying to find a way to get around the system and the regulations to grant waivers to businesses and not allow them to put traps in. So if we can come up with, and I think with Mr. O'Regan, with his help, I think we can make some progress that, without reinventing the wheel that you had to do up in Newburyport. So that'd be my recommendation at this point, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Castanetti. I think that I'm a little surprised by what you just said, that the notion that the board's direction is to grant waivers. If the board's goal was to be granting all these waivers, we wouldn't be going through all of these processes that we have been going through over the last couple of months to determine what is the best solution to protect that ACO and to protect the taxpayers' dollars and to protect these folks who, like I say, have been coming here on a regular basis and are awaiting our answer. So it's a little bit surprising that anyone would think that our goal is to be just arbitrarily giving waivers. I don't know where that came from, but...
I've heard it. I know others on this board have heard it as well. So
No,
I
I have
just
no-
wanna all right, I just want to make it very clear that that's not the intent of this.
No, and I don't question what you're saying. I'm questioning whomever is out there making these statements. It really is very inaccurate. How would the board like to proceed? Do you feel that, I mean, as you say, Mr. O'Regan has a tremendous amount of knowledge, and certainly so doesn't Mr. Giacalone and CDM. What would be the suggestion on the best manner in which to bring all of the minds, all of you that have this level of expertise? We've asked before, and maybe in a different term.
Madam Chairman?
Yes.
If I could add one other thing. I think one of the problems we're going to be facing,
Yes.
even no matter what kind of a system we put in, who's going to inspect them?
That's right.
Frank, you're going to be doing this on the weekends or what? I mean, we don't have people that can go out and do it right now. Are we going to hire? Are we going to create positions for a grease fog inspector for the town? Because it doesn't make a bit of difference what kind of a system we put in. If nobody's monitoring it, then what's the sense? But we really do need somebody out there to check into it.
Madam Chairman?
Yeah, we only get records that show where the grease is going when it's pumped. And I have that about probably 95% there with establishments and the licensed haulers that haul it away. But I agree, in terms of the frequency, we have no way of knowing if it's enough because we'd have to open up the tank itself.
How
to
often do you
check.
get a report from the establishments?
It all depends on the frequency. Some are pumped out monthly, like the Kowloon. Other ones maybe quarterly. And it depends. And we get that from the haulers, service pumping and drain, for instance.
So there's no requirement from the Board of Health for a report on a regular basis?
There is. When I send out their applications, I say that I want a listing of all their establishments, and whenever they get pumped, yes, it's supposed to send me a record.
And do you monitor that, Frank? I mean,
No, again,
I'm
it
not trying
comes
to put
in.
you on the spot, but I know you got a lot of things to do. If somebody doesn't send one, do you really notice that?
We may not, to be truthful,
Yeah.
no, because Charlene used to get them in.
And again, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I mean, you can only do so much as one person.
Yeah, at this point, just to get these establishments to even provide those records, I found that we had, my septic hall permits went from 6 to almost 26. I had vendors out there, not even licensed through us, until I started demanding these records. And again, that's the first step. So we need to progress and, again, get someone out there to make sure that they're being pumped frequently enough so it doesn't overflow. Again, we need some manpower for that.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman?
Mr. Manager.
I think Selectman Castanetti raises a valid point. Part of, I think, and we've talked about this a little bit, is that if, certain devices or alternatives have where there's actually buildup of the fog and that's actually removed by a company or whatnot. But so I think looking at it and that's something that we'd have to certainly consider on whatever regulations we change, would be for somebody to monitor it, because you'd probably look at how many seats or what, some sort of an auditing system that would say this has got so many seats in this type of restaurant and this is what they would produce. And if they're having a private company pick up the excess, once a month or whatever it is when they pick it up, they may be, the issue is that if they don't have it pick it up all the time, they pick that portable fog or grease up, it could be dumped anywhere, in a backyard, outside. So I think that's part of trying to make sure that somebody has picked it up and it's actually delivered to where it's supposed to go, correct, Frank? So
And that's the material data?
I'm sorry?
Safety data sheets that they're supposed to submit to you, correct?
I can't really, bad echoes.
That's the safety data sheets that they're supposed to submit to you?
They're supposed to submit what we call pumping records.
Right.
And the pumping records just says, it'll note the condition of the tank, how much solids is in there, what was pumped out, the amount, how many gallons, and more importantly, where it was disposed of, so where it went to the treatment facility. It does not give any recommendations, the report does not make any recommendations whether it's being pumped out frequently enough. If there is a failure in the system, they will note that. But again, in terms of the frequency, it all depends on the size of the tank. You can have a 5,000-gallon outside tank or 1,000 gallons, so the frequency will be different as well.
Madam Chair, my recommendation, as far as this goes, is I would probably, and it's up to the pleasure of the board, but maybe have these folks have sort of some conversation over the next couple of weeks, and then maybe come with some recommendations that the board can consider.
Selectman Deb.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Giacalone, could I just clarify what you had said to follow up on Mr. Castanetti's question? The Board of Health has a requirement of how often grease traps are to be pumped, or they do not?
We do not.
Okay, so I thank you for that, because I wanted to make sure I heard you correctly. So that explains why you get some information and not others, or you get a flurry of information. Like you said, you went from 6 to 26 or 20 haulers all of a sudden?
Yes, we almost doubled the amount of haulers that we had to permit, because again, no one was monitoring what was going on. So then I started looking at these pumping records, and I said, wow, we should really get on top of this, at least to see that it is being pumped out and not being thrown in the backyard or whatnot. But again, in the frequency of it, unless you get someone out there to really see how much grease an establishment generates, that's the only way to know that, it's not being thrown outside and not being disposed of properly.
Madam Chairman, if I could, I think it's important, because we've really worked very hard on this, that, the people who have the most expertise sit down, as the manager has said, but clearly a bylaw has to be created, or an ordinance, with many facets to it, and that's where the expertise of the DPW director comes in, having worked with an ordinance. But we want something that's going to be done in a timely fashion, so that the economic development of people coming to our community can thrive and can grow and not continue to be in limbo. And we've been dealing with this since November. So in one very good meeting tonight, we have the people we need to help us in the way of an ordinance, in the way of taking your experience and helping the community and then moving forward. And again, thank you very much.
Mr. Manager.
Yes.
Would you feel that the employees here that you've identified, Mr. O'Regan, Mr. Giacalone, I'm sorry, Jonathan, I don't remember your last name, from CDM. Are these the folks that you're saying that should sit down, have a meeting?
Try to figure out an action plan.
Try to figure out an action plan. I do not want to, well, I guess I'm going to have to put you on the spot. What do you folks feel is a reasonable time frame that you could meet, go over what's currently in place, make the suggestions to the board as to the best actions? Would you like to get back to us on that? I see a bunch of people smiling going, whoa. I'm sorry? Sure.
Maybe we could get together and report back through the town manager what an appropriate time would be to get, how long it would take us.
You can simultaneously, I know that, certainly the town manager is your, direct employer, not the Board of Selectmen, and I respect that. But do you think that it would be okay with you, Mr. Manager, if we were CC'd on communications that come directly from the group who meets? And this way, your plate can be pretty full sometimes too, so this way we don't have to rely on putting that extra burden on you. Whatever you folks come up with, certainly go through the town manager, but CC the Board of Selectmen as well. Again, we want to see this. You have been here a couple of times, and you folks have been great to come out and share this information, but I can't say it enough, that it's these people back here that have the concerns. They want to be able to do business in this community, and they want to be able to do it in the appropriate fashion. We've extended folks. Nobody has been given a waiver out of this group. They've had extensions, but they have not been given waivers, correct? So if you could, Mr. Manager, try to, I know that this is a busy season, but maybe get this rolling, because I know of one particular group out here, we're going to have to give them another extension.
Okay.
We have a gentleman who is here with his attorney. These costs add up for the business owners, and if there can be a solution that can be derived, you have the expertise if you could go for it. Mrs. Panetta.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome.
You mentioned earlier that the establishment was able to determine their own system. Can I assume that there was a set of proven and successful systems that people got to choose from? So, somebody who was brand new purchasing a business, they probably didn't know the best grease interceptor.
Right.
And you gave them some guidance. Maybe they were the top 4, the top 5 that you may have suggested?
We would let them know of systems that we were aware of that had worked in the past. Just like if someone had recommended they were building a new house, or they had a house that was connected to a septic system and they wanted to connect to the city sewer. We might say, hey, these are 5 contractors that we know that do good work, but we wouldn't recommend any of them. It would be similar to that. And we actually had a workshop, of these are certain vendors, and we had in an auditorium like this, and had them come up and they could talk to the vendors. But this is what I was referencing earlier when I was told us it took us 2 to 3 years to get to the point where we were comfortable with it. We didn't just, edit the ordinance, and I understand time is very important, but we did do a methodical process to go through and make sure things were done properly and given that type of information out. So the direct answer to your question, yes, we gave them options, but we didn't say, these are the ones you have to pick from. These are the 5 or 10 or 15 that we're aware of. You have to pick one of these 5, 10, or 15. We just said these are 5, 10, or 15 that we're aware of.
But I think what I'm grateful for, and is same with the sentiments of the rest of the board, is that you have experience working with these alternative
Right.
grease traps. So even though you may not be necessarily recommending them, you have expertise in their success levels.
Right.
So we now have somebody that we can talk with who's, somebody brings something in, it looks like a contraption, we don't know what the success rate, does it work as well as the traditional external grease trap or not? And you having that experience is great, so thank you.
One of the things I'd add, engineers are conservative by nature. No one wants to be the engineer who designs something that doesn't work. So things tend to be over-designed. But there's reasons for that, too. I mean, Frank and Jim raised some really good points about the history of external grease traps and the need for those in certain locations. It is a belts and suspenders approach. If someone isn't maintaining something internally as often as they should, and the resources aren't there to hire an inspector, or the position gets cut or something like that, it's a good safety valve to have that, to make sure that that material doesn't make it out into the collection system. So that's just another example of why it's going to take some deliberation, it's going to take some back and forth as to, how much risk is the community willing to take, to avoid a upfront capital cost, how much are you willing to put on an annual O&M cost, so you're still making sure people are in compliance. So it's that give and take and that back and forth.
Mr. Allen?
Well, actually, now I got a twofold question. Now, talking about the grease and the fog, that actually has value now, doesn't it, for the recycling purposes?
For larger establishments, there's a big facility, probably most of us have heard of, Baker Commodities out of Billerica, Massachusetts, rendering facility. They're the biggest one around here that will take the material. Really, really large establishments in Texas and Florida, large restaurants, I should say, and where there's a lot of that type of cooking going on, yeah, they can sell and make a lot of money. I mean, there's been stories about, we've all seen people that have where they store grease right next to their dumpster in certain locations, and those things being stolen for the grease. So, but that doesn't happen up here that often. So.
And then the second full part of the question, I guess, Madam Chair, through you to, I think, maybe the town manager, is to start the whole process moving forward. Are we agreeing that we're going to start the research on what our flow rates are and what discharges we have going forward? Because that's going to be part of the whole project
I
anyway.
believe that was part of the whole project that was mentioned
So
earlier.
did we agree that we're going to go forward with
identify.
that?
I think in general, obviously, they're the engineers and the technical people, so I would suggest let them sort of meet and have dialogue to come up with some sort of an action plan of the best way to deal. I think they got an idea of what the community's issue is and what we're trying to resolve and where we're trying to go. I think let them come up with some sort of an action plan. It sounds like you have to work backwards from the Lynn Water and Sewer plant and then meet their requirements and regulations and go from there.
And then going back on to what you brought up at the beginning, that was the main criteria of you guys moving forward, was to actually establish what the discharges were, correct?
The limit that would be set, exactly, what that limit, that technologically limit would have to be calculated, correct.
So wouldn't it be prudent for us to actually go forward with that part of it as we come up with the action plan, because we're going to need those figures in order to move forward?
I think it's all part of what the town manager mentioned earlier, which is basically a comprehensive plan, whether it be the limit that's set, whether it be where the material's going to go, what the inspections are going to be, how that's going to be paid for. It would be all part of a comprehensive plan that we would have to get to you.
And Madam Chairman, I would even add that, not as an immediate priority, but we should probably look at, and Selectman Dever had raised this, is an overall educational sort of campaign for even residents and residential, so that there's information on a website and there's information that maybe goes out in the tax bills that explains these type of program, the fog and how we can reduce that. I think that would help, I think, putting a whole comprehensive plan put together.
You're referring to what Mrs. Dever brought up earlier this evening.
That's correct.
Madam Chairman?
Selectman
If I
Dever?
could, I absolutely understand what you are saying and the time that it takes to put together a very good program. I did a lot of research up in the Newburyport and, in fact, Hopkinton and a number of communities. But we've waited almost 120 days to get to this point. From the time we were elected, we have been talking about this and talking about this. Can we at least hope to see not only a preliminary action plan, and I'm really pleased that a board and a commission will get the legal expertise that they need and some assistance. But a bylaw or an ordinance, can you at least take a look at those that other communities have, so that you, who are trying to enforce what you currently have that really isn't workable, will have some leeway, and so that these folks don't have to be coming in here continually?
Yeah,
Would that be a first step in a
Yes.
90 or 120-day plan? Because
It would be done before 90 days, so I can
Thank you.
guarantee you that. Or
it's a start.
I have looked at our bylaws and ordinance already.
Thank you.
And I'm familiar with other communities. But the question would be, as far as the question of being, this originally started with giving a date when we could report back to you. I just don't feel, I'd like to have an opportunity to speak with Frank, speak with Jim, obviously speak with the town manager. Everyone's schedules are different. I know my workload, I can't comment on other people's workload. I'd just like to have the opportunity to have a sit-down meeting and then report back as to when we can meet this demand.
Yeah, and Madam Chairman, just a suggestion, obviously, something the board to consider is, obviously, this is very comprehensive, and this is a group of experts, I think, that are going to assist in what the town is trying to do, is maybe separate the issue of the pressure of the time of these gentlemen in the back of the room, so that it's two separate issues, and it doesn't create sort of a bottleneck, and that might then allow them to do the job that, as engineers and lawyers, sort of want to do to make sure it's comprehensive and airtight.
I think the main concern with the folks that have been here consistently in the back of the room is the last thing they want to hear is that they're not in compliance. That's not fair to them. So what has happened to them over the last couple of months is they have had to continuously come back and come before the board. Again, I do not profess to have any strength of knowledge in all of this. We have these folks, one's waiting for the call of the chair, the other one is on an extension for compliance. What are the ramifications of continuing that process until we get an answer from you folks? Or do we, again, educate me here, too, as somebody who has a responsibility when it comes to these rules and regulations?
George, is that a question that might be better suited for a legal issue? I'm sorry, Madam Chairman.
Again, the actual drafting of any bylaw regulation, we can handle. As far as how fast that can be done, it's the devil's in the details, and what comes up, what's the alternatives analysis that will allow a smaller business to operate in a cost-effective manner. As far as allowing out of compliance, they're out of compliance. So I think, again, I can't make that determination. I haven't looked at that regulation in a while, but an extension, I don't know the specifics of each situation that's out of compliance or what flow and what fog levels are going out, and how that might impact the sewer line directly outside that facility. And again, I need to look at the specific situation and take a look at it.
So maybe that's something that we can have a discussion outside the meeting, and then they would have a better handle on a direction to go in with
Absolutely.
that.
Because I
Because
think
a lot
that
of
could
these have
be
been
expedited a little bit quicker to address this, as you say, keep it as two separate entities.
Right, and I think the other issue is that, and I mean, all we can do is the best we can do.
Right.
As a board, as a sewer commissioners, as a town. I think these individual businesses they were grandfathered in, and this has been something that's ongoing, and I don't think anybody's expecting that you're gonna solve that problem or have to deal, a problem that's existed for 50 years. We're doing the best we can do, and I think it's reasonable to try to figure this out, so that both things aren't intersecting or causing pressure to do something that, in the other comprehensive part of it, trying to put something together, should be two different tracks, so.
Absolutely. So perhaps we can get the information, Madam Clerk, we could get the information to the attorney, and you can review it on the two particulars. We have two outstanding establishments, correct? Okay. So perhaps we can get you the details, you can review them. Would that
Get back to
be?
the board, and get back to you
the
people
board?
on suggestion, yes.
Thank you so much. Does that seem to be agreeable to the board?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. And then you folks will all work out a time frame that you'll sit down and work on the bigger picture, which is so that we don't have to have people continuously coming back. We can resolve this once and for all, update our regulations, what requirements, what technologies are there. Are there any further comments or suggestions, questions from the members of the board? Mr. Manager, anything else you'd like to add?
No other, thank you.
Madam Chairman, if I might make one more comment.
Certainly.
Mr. O'Regan mentioned redundant systems and having a backup just in case. I don't think this board has any problems with that whatsoever. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think our main concern is, and I hate to speak for the board, but I'll speak for myself anyway. I've been going through this for many years now. And I think the main concern is the external grease trap being installed in situations where it could cost $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 to install it. But redundancy, in my opinion, makes a whole lot of sense, and I don't have any problem with that. I wouldn't expect that the rest of the board would either.
Again, thank you all so much for coming in and sharing your knowledge and your expertise with us, and we look forward to hearing your recommendations.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thank you, everyone.
To those in the back of the room, thank you again for your patience. As you can see, we're just getting a little bit closer to getting the answers that you've been so patiently waiting for. Thank you so much.
Madam Chairman, if I could make a motion for a 2-minute recess?
Seconded by the chair. All those in favor?
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you. To order. Next on the agenda is the FY15 budget. I believe the police department is the next one to be reviewed, is that correct? Okay.
Madam Chairman, do we want to get into this again? We just got the budget actuals tonight.
Okay.
Do we want to go through these without having a chance to look at the actuals? I mean, I just think we're going to continue the process we started last week
Right.
without all the information, because none of us, I'm sure, have had a chance to look at this.
No, we haven't. The question I would have, though, Selectman Castanetti, is, we discussed earlier, we're going to have an additional meeting.
Yep.
And when that meeting is going to take place, we all already had previously scheduled.
We were talking, how about Saturday morning, early Saturday morning?
Okay, this is a tough thing thing to just, but I'll just say it, if I have to cancel babysitting for my grandchildren in Groton, okay, I'll do it. I'll see if I can't get someone else to do it, but when we're at meetings 5 and 6 times in the course of a week, we talked about having it Thursday, and somebody couldn't come Thursday, and then we talked about having it Friday. We can't do Friday because it's a legislative breakfast. I think that it was very kind of these folks to include us in that breakfast. Is that something that's of a level of importance to all of you to attend that breakfast?
Well, I think
Yes.
they asked for RSVPs, and I know that I responded, and
Okay,
I think we have an obligation to attend if we say we're going to be there.
right, okay.
Not to put you on the spot either, but you're up at 4 o'clock in the morning. Why don't we meet at 5?
Yes, I am up quite
I'm
early, be
free.
very careful. So you do not want to go through this budget tonight, is what you're saying?
I prefer not to.
Madam Chairman?
Selectman Deva?
It is difficult. We had asked for the budget to actuals, and we actually received it at 6 o'clock this evening. So, in all honesty, none of us have had a chance to go through it, and being even more honest, the font is so small that I would really struggle without a magnifying glass. This font's really small, Wendy. But I mean, we asked for it. We wanted to be able to compare what was being requested versus what is spent. It is a multi-page document. I'm not sure that we can have a educated conversation about it right now.
The other question I would have, I'm going to just respect the wishes of the board.
Well, Madam
Your
Chairman,
salary, before you ask that, there was one other piece of information that had been requested. When we met last week, part of your presentation to the board was that you felt that some members of the staff, you referred to the word parity, and making comparisons to other communities. Were you able to get that information? That was last piece that we're missing. It's hard to look at your request and to make a recommendation when your request was based on information, but you weren't able to provide that hard copy yet. Have you?
we're in the process of putting that together.
You're in the process of it, okay.
Madam Chairman?
Selectman Deva.
Difficulty is that, as you were, Mr. Manager, we are under an obligation to have this budget transmitted to the Finance Committee by March 1st.
Correct.
We have now, this will be our second meeting, where we're still gathering information on a very, very tight time frame. We're now readjusting our schedules one more time to try and meet the deadline and do the work that we need to do. So we cannot wait for this information. We need it when we ask for it. I appreciate all the hard work, but these guidelines of when the budget is transmitted are very much set in stone. They don't change from year to year. We really need that information. So I think it's a fair request, and it's been a week, and I think we need to go forward and make sure that we're able to transmit this budget properly.
I spoke to town council this afternoon and asked him the consequences of not producing this budget right on March 1st. And while there was a time that the budget had not been forwarded by the March 1st deadline, there were extenuating circumstances to that particular occurrence. That does not apply here. However, what does apply here is that the board feels that they need certain informations. Whether somebody agrees or disagrees is not the point. The decision is the members of the board's decision. When we need to make a recommendation, we need to be able to do it with all of the information that everybody feels comfortable with.
Madam Chairman?
Mr. Manager.
I guess my I guess suggestion would be if, as far as the information that you've received, as far as the budget actuals, obviously is something you're going to analyze and look at. My suggestion would be is to go through what we have for questions. In other words, with the budget, things that come up, I think that would at least get through the budget with any questions that the members have. And we've been through half the, a third of the budget now with answering questions that come up. I think that would be a good use of time.
Do you feel that by doing so and then going back and reviewing the budget to actuals, that then we may have to start at point one again to go through the whole thing? Should questions come up in any of the members' processes when they're going through this, could that make it a little redundant?
I'm not sure how each individual looks at it, but I mean,
I'm
would.
saying that to you, is
yeah.
that almost like a duplication of efforts?
Well, I would suggest, I mean, it depends on each individual, but I'm not sure that the budget to actuals you have 5 months that are there, that we added a month to 6 months, how much of a difference that makes. It's certainly, in the sense of what questions you have with the general budget for each department, but that's certainly up to, the board.
Madam Chairman?
Selectman Deva?
For me, it's very important, and I don't want to speak for any other board member, but it is wonderful to go through a budget right now, it's presented, see some increases, ask some questions, but to really know historically what's been spent is very important. If there's a dramatic increase, I won't have that question until after I look at the budgets to actuals. We've been patient, we've been respectful. I think we all want to do a very good job. We just got this an hour before our meeting began. I see going through this budget without taking a look at this.
Madam Chairman, that's certainly up to the board, but I just, for clarification, the information that you're receiving this evening that you requested is 1 more month of actuals. So you have 5 months of actuals that you've had since the 15th. This is 1 more month's worth. But if that's the wishes of the board, that's obviously the board can do what they like.
Madam Chair?
Selectman Panetta?
I don't take issue with reviewing the budget tonight. If the board wants to review the budget tonight, if you want to postpone it and move it out, that's fine too. Because I'm prepared to go for it tonight. If again, the board decides that's what we want to do, because we are all here. Wednesday, we have the opiate meeting, the economic development meeting. Wednesday's out. Thursday, we have the statement of interest meeting. I think you said one member wasn't able to make it.
Yes, there is a member who has a previous obligation.
So that Thursday night, they won't work. Friday night's the breakfast, Friday morning's the breakfast. Friday night, I hate to meet on a Friday night, but if Saturday morning is problematic, are people free Friday night? I don't have dates anymore, I'm old, so.
Friday night would be fine with me as well.
Would that work for you?
But I don't
Friday
know that
night?
it works for the board members.
If people have obligations Saturday morning, Friday night works.
And Madam Chairman, speaking on that, and I think it's a great suggestion, Selectman Panetta, gives us an opportunity to take a look at this, and give the manager the opportunity to provide the objective wage salary survey information that we asked for.
Madam Chair, through you.
Sure.
To the town manager and our town treasurer, you have the long title. Are you available Friday night?
We appreciate being considered on the time. I think Friday evening would be, better for both of us, having young families.
Okay, great.
Friday evening?
Yes. Would be better than Saturday, considering we both have young families and spend a lot of time.
My son appreciates that comment, too.
Thank you.
What time are we talking on Friday?
6ish? What time would you be?
I could try to, we were actually talking
You
about
have
that.
a 4 o'clock meeting,
I have a
correct?
4 o'clock meeting. If,
Is that your meeting, or is that is that one of your mandated meetings?
it's a one I have to go to.
Okay.
But it's only scheduled for half an hour. Hopefully it just lasts a half hour. If I leave at 4:30, I should be able to get here by 6:30, depending on the traffic. You never know what Friday traffic, but 6:30 I'd feel comfortable with.
Works for me.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I should, as far as I can see right now. I did mention to you that I may have something come up Friday night, but as of right now, I still have that open.
Okay. And Madam Chair, one more thing?
Sure.
Is there, I hate to ask for more paper to be generated, but I can't read this. Is there any,
Thank you, I thought it was just me.
No, no.
The font is so small.
I'm sorry, but is there any way that you could print this on legal? Is that
Sure,
possible?
And I can eliminate the account numbers. That doesn't necessarily mean much to the board. You have the account name. That would provide more room and enlarge it a little bit.
Yeah, I'm sorry for the extra paper, it's just that and maybe if you could, if it's possible, if this is emailable, is this done in Excel?
Yeah, I emailed it to you all this evening as well.
Oh, perfect, okay. So we could print it out ourselves, too. All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
One more question of the board before we nail this down for Friday night. Will you have that information for your parity?
We certainly...
I think that you would have that
yeah,
by Friday,
I
because
think
what I
it'd probably
don't
be
want
on
to see...
Friday that we would have.
Pardon me?
We probably would say, probably Friday is when would be able to...
Okay, because I don't think it's fair to anybody, I don't think it's fair to the board members, I don't think it's fair to either one of you to come in on Friday night and say that there's other materials that were requested that aren't available. So if we could just have an answer as to whether or not that information will be available for that night.
Okay.
Okay?
6:30, right?
6:30 on Friday night.
Madam Chairman? And
Mr.
just
Mayor.
to add, and obviously, to put in perspective, is that the timelines that we have that are set out in the charter were set out back in whenever it was, the 40s.
Right.
You know, which is sort of different than most other communities. But it is what it is, unfortunately, and even for myself, as the manager putting a recommended budget, it's a preliminary estimate, and as everybody knows that's been involved in this sort of vets out with the state and even after the July 1st of what assessments are and what estimates, what local receipts are and local aid, as well as the other numbers. So this is the best, best that we are able to do under this time in February. It's still early.
Right, but
It's a
you
work
run
in
the
progress.
day-to-day operations of the community. The Board of Selectmen needs to make a recommendation on your recommendations.
That's correct.
Okay, that is not something that's going to take place consistently. We're not going to constantly going back after town meeting is already adjourned and set the budget and say, okay, we're going to amend it again, or we're going to amend it again, because further information has come forward.
Yeah, I
don't
mean,
think you have consistency
historically, it's
that
the-
come from the Board of Selectmen. It's come from the town manager's office, but you've not seen it come, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, historically, the form of government we have, it's the Finance Committee that puts a recommendation that goes on to the town meeting floor. So it's really,
I
the
agree,
budget is
but we
developed there.
need to
Yeah.
give our recommendation on that. Of course, it's going to be FinCom who makes the recommendation to town meeting, but any adjustments to that does not usually at the direction of the Board of Selectmen, correct?
Generally not at the direction of the manager either.
Okay. I just want to make certain that everybody has the information. If we go over this March 1st, we are not in compliance with the charter. Is it explainable to the people in our community as to why we did not meet the deadline of March 1st? Of course it is. We don't have the information that was requested. You folks were busy. You had a lot of things to do. But I still think that we respect the charter. We respect the guidelines put in place, so.
And they're there for a reason.
We will do this on Friday night, and hopefully it won't be too long.
And I agree with you, Madam Chair. I would feel more comfortable adhering to that March 1st date on our
Yep.
charter.
Well, we need to stick to it. Okay. I apologize you had to come out of your warm home, and you look very tired. Next, we have members' comments, and I will be starting this week. We started at this end last week. We're going to be starting over here this week. Mrs. Dever, do you have anything that you wanted to raise this evening?
Actually, I did, Madam Chairman, I know.
Oh, was I supposed to start?
I thought it was his
I think I
turn,
cut
so
poor
I
Mr.
didn't want to be
Castanetti,
rude.
because I went to Mrs. Panetta, and then I apologize, Mr. Castanetti.
That's twice today, you know.
It's twice today? Well, give me a little time. It could be 3 times before it's adjourned.
Through you to the manager. Mr. Manager, can you give us an update on the Munis system?
Sure. Actually, Wendy would have been better to give the update, but...
Wendy?
She's gone.
Gotta go home. Essentially, they are still meeting regularly on the setup and completing the setup of all what's needed in the system with chart of accounts and the flow-through to create reports and whatnot from the setup guts of it. And then they'll move on to, at some point, that there's a schedule that they'll move on to implementation of training and whatnot, but we're still on track for a July 1st live date for the financials module.
July 1st?
Yes. I believe they'll run like both systems parallel until they make sure that, that everything's, they work out whatever bugs and issues happen with the software glitches.
Okay. Are you happy with the way things are going with it?
Yeah, it's just, I think it's a huge undertaking, and I mean, it's just hard if you're not in the accounting world, so to speak. Even for our staff, it's just a major undertaking to convert from one system to another, and the setup basically from scratch. So, but it's I think the system itself, we spent a lot of time with department heads and having a bunch of different companies come in and show what they had and what products, and this seemed to be the sort of Cadillac of it, and it comes in just different modules that you can add to it, so that you can sort of have communication with all departments. But yeah, so far so good.
I know this has been going on for a while, but I don't remember when we started. When did you start the implementation of this?
I believe they started probably, I don't want to guess. It's been ongoing, the conversations. I think we locked into them over the summer, and then I think they started probably sometime in the fall, as far as trying to set up, it's pretty rigorous. They actually make everybody that's involved in the project give out absolute blackout dates that they're not available, so that they don't have the scheduling issues, and they're very strict. I think I talked about it before, is that they have like a couple of 7-minute breaks during the day and a half-hour lunch when they're in the sort of this training mode.
You mentioned the training will start. Is there a lot of training involved in the system?
Yes.
There is. When do you think that's going to start?
Well, part of it is what they're doing now, I think, is the setup of it, and then the training will, I think, I don't have the schedule offhand, but that'll start, and then they have to, train each department to be able to use the system.
So everybody in the department has to be trained on it? Wow. All right.
Yeah, believe me, it's a lot more than, it's just a huge undertaking for the organization and the staff. And it's a new system, because then once you implement it and start, then there's going to be, they have support, but, it'll streamline a lot of policies and controls internally, rather than a lot of manual paperwork that goes on now.
All right, thank you. I have nothing else, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Mrs. Dever.
Oh.
Mrs. Panetta. Mr. Allen.
I just want to make an announcement in reference to tomorrow night at 6:30 here at the auditorium. They're going to be, last year we got a grant on the issues that we've been having with opiate addiction and overdose, which includes heroin and Oxycontin. I had the privilege to sit on that committee, and there was a lot of work that was completed by the organization on collecting data on what actually affects this community. So we're hoping to get a pretty good turnout coming into tomorrow night. There'll actually be dinner served, so folks that want to show up. It's going to be catered through Spinelli's. It'll be an opportunity to learn what the data suggests about the opiate misuse and overdose in Saugus, and the next steps that we're going to take to address it. And it's going to be a hands-on type demonstration, so it should be interesting. Hopefully we'll get everybody to show up.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further, Selectman Allen? Do you have anything further you want to add?
Anything else?
Anything else?
I'm good to go, thank you.
Thank you. Selectman Panetta?
Thank you.
Well, not only do we have the opiate seminar that's going on tomorrow, but we also have from the Economic Development about the riverfront, and this is the second meeting that they're having at 7 o'clock at the Fox Hill Yacht Club. So that, I'm guessing, is going to be very well attended as well, and I know they made a lot of progress, and I believe that all the selectmen got copies of where they are right now. What you may not know is that Saugus River Watershed Council today gave some feedback on the waterfront plans that will be discussed tomorrow night as well. So that should be very interesting. And a real quick follow-up to the Munis system, if you don't mind, through you, Madam Chair, to our town manager. When Selectman Castanetti was asking about the Munis system, there are different modules in the Munis system as well. So, and each module takes a certain amount of time, and I'm assuming that you have milestones, deadlines, so you're going to do that, because I've worked on many different systems, I'm sure you have too, Selectman Dever, being in the field where we help incorporate the computer system within. So I assume that you have some sort of a timeline?
Yeah, the financial will go in July, and that's what we're going to focus on, and then the payroll we're looking at October 1st implementation. And then those will take us into the next year. Then we'll start with some of the other departments.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Selectman Dever?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is more a follow-up to what Mrs. Panetta has spoken about for tomorrow evening's event at the Fox Hill Yacht Club for the overlay, the discussion of the waterfront overlay. And I had the opportunity, along with my fellow board members, to attend the Chamber of Commerce breakfast this morning, where the business community was urged and encouraged to participate, to contact our executive economic development director with input. We're looking for input. This is a comment that I'm going to make. I do not expect a response, but I do expect it to be heard loud and clear. Had an opportunity to attend the Economic Development Committee meeting. Unfortunately, the next meeting held was on one of our board meetings. At that time, we were handed out a draft. They're now actually into their third draft of the waterfront overlay, so they're working very hard on that. People were asked to take it home, look at it, make suggestions, ask questions. Made an appointment with the Economic Development Coordinator for last Friday. The chairman was going to come with me. We were going to have a conversation about the overlay. Not only did I get an email, but I got a phone message informing me that I and other members of the board, in order to meet with any department head, would need to follow protocol and policy, and I must go through the town manager in order to meet with them. So this is what I want to say about this. If this is how the residents and taxpayers are treated, then I would suggest you end this policy immediately. We worked very hard to bring this community out of what I would consider darkness, of people not being able to share their thoughts or bring a thought forward, and I don't want to see us go back to that. So we should be able to be free to exchange ideas, whether they be differing, to ask questions, but in the future, I do not want to ever hear that I cannot talk to a town employee, and I don't think a citizen should be told that without going through your office. So I would suggest we end that policy, Mr. Manager. And I don't expect a response. Absolutely not, Mr. Manager. I have the
Chairman?
emails that you've sent us, and I have the phone messages.
Madam Chairman, I take offense to the comments, and I also take offense to being told that I'm not allowed to speak. But I'll leave it at that because I want to keep it professional, and I'll leave it at that.
Madam Chairman,
Selectman Castanetti?
I'm not sure why you take offense.
I'll leave it at that.
Because,
I think it's best from a
maybe I'll say
professional
something,
standpoint.
and you can leave it to wherever you want, but I think I'll say something at this point in time. After I heard what Selectman Dever went through, it was very reminiscent of the day that I went down to find out why we don't have an accountant. And you all know where that came from.
Madam Chairman, this is a personnel
Excuse me,
issue. and it's
Mr.
out of
Manager,
line.
I'm still speaking, and I
Excuse
believe I
me to
have the
both of
floor.
you. Forgive me. Before you, let me determine, okay? I understand. Mr. Castanetti, just, I don't know where you're going, but I'm going to, go ahead.
I'll tell you where I'm going. On March 28th of 2012, we interviewed for the manager's position. Chairman Serino at that time asked the town manager, current town manager, his thoughts on board members requesting information from departments. Do you recall what your answer was?
Madam Chairman,
Mr. Manager.
if the selectman or one of the selectmen want to talk about something that has to do with my performance or something that they're dissatisfied with, it's not to be done here in a public meeting.
Are you alluding to his performance, Mr. Castanetti?
No. I'm reading the minutes of a public meeting that have been made public,
Okay.
and I'll continue.
It seems to be that obviously he's dissatisfied with, based on his tone, with something that has to do with me from a personnel standpoint. And I don't appreciate it, and I don't think it's fair.
You don't seem to really appreciate any time something negative about you comes up in public. But unfortunately, these things happen,
I wonder how they could become public, Steve.
right there,
Right.
okay? And what Selectman Dever mentioned this evening. The answer was that you had no problem, and you feel the selectmen should have access to information. That was fine during the interview, but it seems like that changed pretty quickly after the job was filled, and I'm a little disappointed in it myself, because this isn't the first time that you've not allowed the selectmen to speak to department heads or employees.
And when did this happen previous?
Did I just not mention when I went down to Human Resources to find out about the accountant position? What happened at that point?
I don't, you want to review that?
Sure, we can review that anytime you
I
want.
think that that's pretty public.
Because
that-
you guys don't have, you had no problem making it public when you took a shot at me.
Who's
But when-
we?
Excuse me?
Who is we?
You, town council, and the former chairman of the Board of Selectmen.
Is this when
made
you-
it a very public thing without any warning whatsoever. So, you know, it goes both ways. And I find it very, very unfortunate that this board can't have access to the information we need to make decisions, to gather information. And I can't tell you how many times, how many employees have spoken to me.
Here we go. This is out of line, it's unprofessional, and it's not the
Madam
forum.
Chairman, if I could interrupt Selectman Castanetti for one moment. I think this board has tried very, very hard to be professional. We have been patient, we have been respectful, and we have been cooperative and collaborative, and that is all we are looking for. It has been almost 4 months. That is all we are looking for, the same respect, dignity, and professionalism that we show you.
Madam Chairman?
Mr. Manager.
I have utmost respect for each one of you that are in the position of selectman, and I would say the same, that if you don't like me, that's fine, it's clear. Certain members don't like me. Just respect the position I'm in and the job and the duties and responsibilities I have under the charter to perform my duty and perform my job. That's all. I love this job. I'm thankful for the opportunity to be here, and I'm fighting for this, to be able to move this town forward for myself, my family, and for the residents of the Saugus. And I would appreciate the same respect.
Madam Chairman, can I just say that I don't think this is a personal attack?
Not at all.
This is something that, well, you can roll your eyes all you want. The fact of the matter is, it's not that we don't like you or I don't like you. I don't like the way you do business. And this is a prime example of that. I've been told over and over again how you've made it very clear to your employees that they are not to talk to the Board of Selectmen.
Absolutely uncalled for.
Mr. Manager, Mr. Castanetti, okay, you know
Wrong
what?
for this to continue, Madam Chairman.
Pardon me?
It's wrong for this to continue.
I'm not going to disagree with you, Mr. Manager, and if you would let me have my say for just a moment before you say that, okay? Right now, I'm going to entertain a motion that we go into executive session to discuss the town manager's contract, because I quite frankly think that we are bordering. Statements have been made, comments have been made in regards to what Mrs. Dever raised earlier. You and I had a conversation on that, and quite frankly, Mr. Manager, I don't want to get into this either, but what was stated today at the chamber meeting was a little bit disheartening when there was a public invitation for folks. Scott, before, just calm down, just let me say this, okay?
I don't need to calm down. What I'm saying is that I think that whatever we want to frame or construe or do whatever goes on.
Nobody
that's
is
fine.
framing a.
Because what you're talking about, an incident that happened that nobody knows what you're talking about,
Then
because the public wasn't there.
Excuse me.
To invite.
Excuse me, right now, you're bordering on insubordination, and I'm sorry to have to say that to you. Now, let me finish my statement before you go down that road. This morning, at the chamber meeting, Mr. Manager, this morning at the chamber meeting, the reason I even got picked up on it, for the public's knowledge, it was brought up about how important the Economic Development Committee and the process is to our community. Nobody disagreed with that. And I think what prompted the question here tonight was that an offer was made to the folks, 60 or plus so people sitting in that room, how important it was that we all have an interest in this, that we all take a role in this. And you specifically pointed out Mr. Luongo and said that the people there should reach out to Mr. Luongo and give their thoughts and opinions. Now, you have a seated selectman here. Please put the phone down when I'm talking.
Look, I want to read something after your
Okay, so
discussion.
you can play with your phone when I'm done talking, okay, if you don't mind? At the time that, Manager, please hear me out. It's been a long day for everybody. At the time that was raised, Mr. Manager, I think I too was like, wait a minute, we weren't able to meet on Friday because another meeting had taken place that he needed to attend, and we had this conversation. I respect that, but when it was rescheduled, Mr. Luongo specifically said to me that he felt in a difficult position and that would I please go through your office. So I did email you last Thursday night and asked if that was the policy, to just let me know. And I think that's the question that was raised here tonight, but it can be, you were in this position, we have a lot of background information, you were in the same position that we are in now. And to ask for information, Mr. Manager, that's being offered to other individuals, I guess it kind of takes us aback. We are members of the Board of Selectmen. This town has voted us in to serve their best interests, and yet, do you follow what I'm saying? Now you
I
know
don't.
what we
I
heard.
think part of it is that the way you're interpreting that is different than what the situation is. And so,
by all means,
that's
correct me.
why I replied to the email that, as you explained, had set up a meeting, whereas he had another meeting to go to. And what I responded to your question was, it is my understanding that Selectman Dever and possibly others on the board wanted to meet with the Economic Development Coordinator individually. She or others may have questions, want additional information, want to give input and/or participate in the waterfront overlay zoning proposal and/or other proposals that the EDC may be working on. Selectman Allen and the board subcommittee, which is made up of Selectman Castanetti, that the board here voted to have them as the liaison to transmit information, are on the economic development. Selectman Allen was a former member of the Economic Development Committee and has a lot of knowledge with that. He's attended meetings and has participated at the EDC meetings since being a selectman. As you're aware, the waterfront overlay zoning proposal for the Ballard Street and 107 area is a collaborative, open process and is a working product of the Economic Development Committee and the Economic Development Coordinator. The committee has regular public meetings with minutes filed with the clerk's office. The goal has been to foster and improve the process from what it was in the past, which, as you're aware, people always said that this is a backroom deal when people come in as developers and they meet with the manager or whoever and get this done. So we've tried to establish an economic development committee that has an open process. It is the preferred venue to have the public, as well as elected and appointed officials, to attend the EDC public meetings and to have fruitful discussions. As you're aware, with the Mill District zoning bylaw, it was implied by a town meeting member on the floor at the last special that there may not have been an open process with the zoning or economic development now or in the past. Hence, the best forum for discussion, process, and perception is at open public EDC meetings, in addition to EDC can give an update. In addition, the EDC can give an update to the Board of Selectmen at an open meeting here. I am not sure how this works into the board subcommittee, because you have a subcommittee that's supposed to be relaying information and attending the meetings. All board members, including the subcommittee members, are again invited and welcome to participate at any and all of the EDC meetings. And I am open to discuss any input and discussion on this matter. So the way that you're interpreting that, or the situation even at this morning at the breakfast, is that it's open. So if somebody contacted the Economic Development Coordinator and said, I have this issue or that, he would refer or ask for their comments and then refer and say, come to the meeting and participate. And that's what the process is about, and that's what we're trying to do, so that it would get away from people meeting individually with the Economic Development Planner or with developers, as if there's a process that's going on, particularly when you're an elected official. And that's what it's about. It's nothing of what has been characterized by the board this evening.
Okay, and I'll accept your explanation for that. And a discussion is never a problem. If you feel that that was misinterpreted, so I would ask you, is this something that your employees are aware that this is the processes by which you want things to be handled?
In what matter?
Again, there's almost a hesitation because of past practice, to be frank with you, that you have people who have worked very hard for this community. All 5 of us sitting here are very committed to doing what's right for this community. And I think that innocently people would be, I know I personally would be, given what has taken place in the recent past and the not-so-recent past, to address one of your employees without going through you is a forbidden process. Is that correct?
Nothing is forbidden, but it's not my policy. It's an organization, just like the police department, as if you wouldn't call the lieutenant and have the lieutenant do something. It's an organization, and it's something that I was on the board. It's a practice that is just common courtesy to say, geez, I'd like to get some information from the Economic Development Coordinator, and if I received that call, I would have said, why don't we just have him come to the meeting tonight, and he can address the entire board, because you may have the same questions that everybody else would have. And that would be helpful to the process. But that didn't transpire.
Madam Chairman. Madam Chairman.
Excuse me, I'm going to let the manager finish.
Okay, so essentially, that is, in general, would be, it's not a new policy, it's a common courtesy. When I was on the board, I wouldn't call department heads and tell them, I want you to be here at a certain time. I have no idea, as a board member, when somebody is committed to another meeting or not, and I think it becomes confusing for department heads who they're reporting to. And the charter is pretty clear.
Now I think you have a little bit of confusion, but I'm going to let Mrs.
Madam
Decker speak on
Chairman,
that.
I really am going to say again that I think this board has worked very hard, has treated you with respect, has been patient, and I will tell you that the email that you so kindly just read was sent out last night. This has been going on for over a week and a half. Mr. Luongo asked for input at his meeting. Our subcommittees were just created at our last meeting, so the facts are getting a little hazy here. The bottom line here is, you said in an email that it was a policy. The phone message left for me was, I needed to follow protocol. I want to be treated like any other citizen. The gentleman asked for input.
But you're not
Excuse
any
me,
other citizen.
Excuse me, we
That's-
asked for input. We have input to give. We both come, we can't give it. I just would like your policy of everything having to go through you to be reconsidered, because I don't think any citizen or anybody else walking in here who wants to talk to a public employee should have to go through your office. The gentleman asked for input. Now, we have 2 conflicting meetings tomorrow night, so how does that input get given if we're at another meeting? So again, I think you're escalating this to something it doesn't need to be. I'm asking you to think about how we treat people and how we treat one another and move this forward.
I agree.
I don't think any town employee should be afraid to speak to any of us.
No, I don't know who is implying, and I don't appreciate it being implied, and it's offensive. No employees are afraid to speak to any citizen or any elected official.
They should not
Many
be.
of you are in here all the time talking to the employees,
they
so I
should
don't
not
understand
be.
where why it's being implied that somehow people are afraid to speak to you. It doesn't make any sense.
Asking you to reconsider your policy or your protocol for allowing someone to have a conversation about something that benefits the town. Diversity of opinion is a good thing. It doesn't mean we always agree, but we can do it respectfully. And that's all I wanted
Again,
to
Madam
say
Chairman,
about
there's
that.
nobody that's not trying to let you have your voice. If you want the Economic Development Coordinator, as I said, he's happy to come here. You attended a meeting, participate, give input. That's what the process
That's what
is
we were
about.
trying to
But I
do.
think when you're an elected official or an appointed official, you're held to a different standard. In the
And so
sense of,
when-
we don't want the perception of what went on at town meeting where people feel that whether it's selectmen or other town officials that are sort of, pushing for certain things that aren't in an open process. So
I
we're
think
trying to be
input-
transparent for the residents and the citizens,
Madam
and so that
Chairman-
it has more credibility.
Madam Chairman, I will only say, once again, that the interpretation is 2 very different stories here. The bottom line is, we're on the 3rd draft of an overlay, and everyone should be allowed to give their input. So thank you.
Madam Chairman, in regards to tonight, I think that it would be best, I prefer not to meet in executive session. I think that there's too much emotions that seem to be here, and I think it would be best for parties to meet on another night.
I'm going to agree with the town manager. I do not think tonight is the best night for us to be going into executive
I
session.
agree with you.
So, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn. Excuse me, were there any citizens' comments? Everyone on the board has had their members' comments? Okay. Motion to adjourn?
So moved, Madam Chairman.
Selectman Castanetti moves to adjourn, seconded by the chair. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Good night.
Motion passes 5-0. Good night.